November 1975. A villa on the island of Rhodes. Robert Plant lies in a hospital bed, his ankle shattered in multiple places. His wife Maureen beside him, injuries far worse. Their children barely escaped the same crash. The world's biggest rock band just lost its singer. Not to death, to physics, metal, bone, and bad timing. 3,000 miles away, Jimmy Page waits by a phone. The news keeps getting worse. The tour, the massive money-printing North American tour, is cancelled. Millions in revenue, gone. But that's not the real crisis. Led Zeppelin hasn't released an album in over a year. Critics are sharpening their knives, calling the band bloated, past their prime. And now Plant can't walk. Page makes a decision that will define everything that comes next. They won't wait. They won't take time to write. They'll record immediately. Whatever they can pull from the wreckage, in 18 days. The question no one asks out loud. What happens when desperation replaces inspiration? By 1975, Led Zeppelin existed in a different atmosphere than other bands. They didn't just sell records. They moved economies. A single Zeppelin tour could inject millions into local markets. Their manager, Peter Grant, had rewritten industry contracts, giving artists unprecedented control and profit. But with that power came pressure that would crush lesser acts. The silence was becoming dangerous. Plant's accident meant months more without touring. In the music industry of 1976, silence equals death. Punk was rising in London, calling stadium rock dinosaurs. Critics who once praised Zeppelin now questioned their relevance. The band's tax situation added another complication. As British tax exiles, they needed to stay out of the UK. Their entire operation had become a nomadic circus, moving between countries to avoid financial ruin. An album wasn't just expected, it was existential. Page understood this better than anyone. He'd always been the architect, controlling the riffs, the production, the sonic identity. While Plant wrote lyrics and sang, Page built the mythology. The mysterious symbols, the folk mysticism, the recording innovations. But innovation takes time, and time was the one resource they'd run out of. So Page proposes something that sounds insane. Record an entire album in less than 3 weeks. No overdubs, no studio trickery, just raw performance. It's a gamble. Maybe the only gamble left. They book Musicland Studios in Munich, November 1975. The studio sits above a nightclub in the city center, not the isolated creative sanctuary they're used to. Urban, loud, claustrophobic. Plant arrives on crutches, his ankle still healing. He can barely stand, let alone perform with the physical intensity Zeppelin demands. The doctors told him to rest for 6 months. He's attempting to record one of rock's most demanding vocal performances after 6 weeks. John Paul Jones, the bassist and keyboardist, notices something immediately. There's no material. Usually, Zeppelin enters the studio with songs half-written, riffs tested on stage, arrangements debated. This time they have fragments, ideas, nothing complete. Page assures everyone it'll work. They'll write in the studio. They'll capture the moment. But the moment feels wrong. Drummer John Bonham is drinking more than usual. The energy in the room swings between manic productivity and uncomfortable silence. Plant, normally the charismatic center, seems distant. The accident haunts him. His family nearly died. And here he is, singing about rock and roll. The first sessions are tense. Page insists on speed. They can't afford second guessing. When Jones suggests a different arrangement, Page overrules him. When Bonham wants another take, Page says they're moving on. Keith Harwood, the engineer, later recalled the atmosphere as pressurized. Not creative tension, something darker. The sense that they were working against a countdown none of them could see. And then the music starts revealing what no one wants to say out loud. The song is Achilles' Last Stand. Page has been working on this riff for months, a sprawling 10-minute epic that shifts through multiple sections. It's ambitious, maybe too ambitious for their circumstances. Plant writes lyrics about travel, mythology, escape. But sitting in that Munich studio, unable to walk, the words take on a different meaning. "It was my first day back," Plant later said. "I had to lean against the wall to sing." Page demands perfection on the guitar tracks. Multiple layers, precisely timed. He records the same parts over and over, building a wall of sound that contradicts his promise of raw simplicity. Jones watches this happen and realizes Page is compensating. Without time for elaborate production, Page is using the only tool he has, guitar. If they can't craft the perfect album, they'll craft the perfect guitar album. Everything else becomes secondary. Jones has been Zeppelin's secret weapon for years. His keyboard work on Stairway to Heaven, his bass lines on the Lemon Song, he's the musical foundation. But on these sessions, there's barely any keyboards. Page wants guitars, Plant wants blues. Bonham wants to hit things. Jones feels himself disappearing. What they're creating isn't just an album, it's a narrowing. Every decision, every overruled suggestion, every guitar layer that replaces a keyboard part, the band is becoming smaller, even as the sound gets bigger. The band records For Your Life, a song about cocaine addiction. It's dark, grinding, uncomfortable. Plant's lyrics don't hide behind metaphor. Can you see yourself in this decline? The band that once sang about Vikings and mystical journeys is now singing about the wreckage they see in the mirror. No one discusses whether this is too honest. They record Nobody's Fault But Mine, a blues cover that becomes a confession. The original was about spiritual failing. Zeppelin's version is about responsibility, about choices that led to this Munich basement. The sessions run 18 days. The album they'd promised would be raw and immediate becomes something else. Compressed, intense, almost frantic, and then they're done. December 1975. The tapes are mixed. Page listens to the final album in a London studio. No one else is there, just him and the engineer. What he hears isn't what he expected. There's power, yes. Achilles' Last Stand is extraordinary. Possibly the best thing Zeppelin has ever recorded. The guitar work is flawless. Plant's vocals, delivered while barely able to stand, have a desperate urgency that studio comfort could never capture. But the album is relentless. There's no Stairway to Heaven here. No Dynamic Valley. It's 10 minutes of epic. Then blues. Then more blues. Then another epic. No acoustic guitars. No mellowness. Just pressure. Beginning to end. Page knows this will divide people. The band discusses the title. Plant suggests presence, the feeling of something or someone in the room that can't be seen. Page agrees. It fits the album's feeling of being haunted by circumstances. They design the cover around an object, a simple black obelisk placed in ordinary settings. Some fans interpret it as mystical, others see it as empty. The object appears in a schoolroom, a marina, a corporate office, always out of place, always unexplained. The band knows what it means, even if they don't say it publicly. This album is the object. It doesn't belong to the moment it was created. It exists outside time, outside context, presence without precedent. In March 1976, Zeppelin's label announces the album will release on March 31st. No singles, no previews, just the announcement, Led Zeppelin has a new album. The decision not to release a single is strategic. Page doesn't trust radio to understand this album. Songs like Achilles' Last Stand run over 10 minutes. For Your Life is too dark for AM radio. The album needs to be heard whole or not at all, but that means no commercial cushion, no hit to smooth the landing. Atlantic Records is nervous. So is Peter Grant. But Page is adamant. This is the album. Take it or leave it. 3 weeks. That's all the space between this moment and the judgment. And no one, not Page, not the label, not the critics waiting with pens ready, knows which way it will fall. March 31st, 1976. Presence hits stores. It debuts at #1 on the UK charts, #1 in the US, certified platinum within weeks. By conventional measures, it's a massive success, but nobody feels like they've won. Critics are confused. Rolling Stone calls it a great hard rock record, but notes it lacks the variety of earlier Zeppelin albums. The Village voice is harsher, bombastic, and one-dimensional. The reviews aren't savage. They're worse. They're lukewarm, respectful, polite. The kind of reviews you give a band you've stopped being excited about. Fans have a split reaction. Many love the rawness. The guitar work on Achilles' Last Stand becomes legendary among musicians. The album sounds like nothing else in 1976. No disco, no soft rock, no compromises. But others miss the eclecticism. Where's the folk influence, the acoustic beauty, the experimentation? T for One, the album's closing track, divides listeners completely. It's a slow blues, almost a dirge. Plant sings about loneliness, distance, separation. He wrote it about being away from his family during recovery. Critics call it boring. Fans call it devastating. The divide isn't about quality, it's about expectation. Led Zeppelin had spent 7 years training audiences to expect innovation. Each album pushed into new territory: folk, funk, reggae, orchestration. Presence pushes nowhere. It drives straight forward, relentless and unforgiving. This isn't failure, but it's not what people wanted. And that gap, between commercial success and cultural disappointment, starts to widen into something more dangerous. Summer 1976. The band tries to tour. Plant's ankle still hasn't fully healed. The shows are scheduled, but everyone knows he's not ready. They play a few dates in Europe. The performances are solid, but the energy is strained. The album doesn't grow the way previous Zeppelin releases did. It sells, then plateaus. No songs break through culturally. Achilles' Last Stand is too long for radio. Nobody's Fault But Mine is too raw. Inside the band, tensions simmer. Jones has already begun to wonder if his role in Led Zeppelin is shrinking. Presence confirmed it. Barely any keyboards, minimal bass presence in the mix. He's becoming a session player in his own band. Bonham's drinking worsens. The pressure, the schedule, the constant motion, it's catching up. Plant struggles with something darker. His son Karak is 5 years old. Plant has missed so much of his childhood. The accident reminded him how fragile everything is. And yet here he is, back on the road, chasing the same machine that nearly destroyed his family. Page, meanwhile, is convinced they did something important. Presence isn't a retreat. It's a statement. A refusal to compromise. But the rest of the band isn't sure who they made that statement for. In 1977, tragedy strikes again. Karak Plant dies suddenly of a stomach infection. Plant is devastated. The band stops everything. This time, there's no rushing back. No Munich studio. No deadline. Zeppelin goes silent for over a year. And when critics look back at Presence, they start asking a question that will haunt the band's legacy. Was this the album that broke them? Or just the first time anyone could see the cracks? It takes years for people to hear Presence correctly. But when they do, the conversation shifts. In the late 1970s and early 80s, as punk collapses and new wave rises, a different generation discovers the album. They aren't comparing it to Led Zeppelin '4. They're hearing it without context, without expectation, and they hear something the original critics missed. Guitarists obsess over Achilles' Last Stand, not just the precision, the necessity. The way Page builds tension across 10 minutes feels like architecture, not showboating. Bands like The Cult and Soundgarden cite it as an influence. They recognize what it actually is, a masterclass in controlled desperation. The album's darkness starts to make sense too. In 1976, it felt like a misstep. Too raw, too uncomfortable. By 1985, as rock gets heavier and more honest about its demons, Presence sounds like it was waiting for the world to catch up. Jack White later called it the most underrated Led Zeppelin album. Jimmy Page himself has said it's one of his favorites, proof, he believed, that Zeppelin could create without the safety net of time. Critics begin to reconsider. A 1990 retrospective in Q magazine calls Achilles' Last Stand one of Zeppelin's crowning achievements. AllMusic eventually rates the album 4 stars, praising its raw power. But here's what changes most. Once the story gets out, the car crash, the 18 days, Plant on crutches, the album transforms from music into evidence. Proof that Led Zeppelin, when stripped of everything, still had something essential. The reassessment isn't universal. Many fans still prefer the sprawling ambition of earlier records. Presence remains the Zeppelin album for purists, not casual listeners. But that divide reveals something important. The album never changed. The understanding of why it exists did. Presence is the sound of a band working without a net. No time, no second chances, no room for doubt. It's tempting to romanticize that, to say it proves that great art comes from pressure. But the reality is more complicated. Yes, Presence contains some of Led Zeppelin's finest playing. Achilles' Last Stand stands with Kashmir and Stairway to Heaven as a monument to what Page could achieve. Plant's vocals, recorded in pain, carry a weight that studio comfort might have softened, but the album also reveals what gets lost when there's no space to breathe. The eclecticism, the experimentation, the joy. Led Zeppelin built their legend on pushing boundaries. Presence is what happens when the boundary becomes survival itself. The album matters because it's honest. It doesn't pretend to be more than it is. A document of a specific, desperate moment. The band could have waited, could have recovered, could have crafted something safer. They didn't. They made the album they were capable of making in that exact circumstance. That's its power. And its limitation. 50 years later, Presence remains Led Zeppelin's most divisive album. Some fans rank it among their best. Others barely remember it. Critics still argue about whether it's underrated or overrated, but everyone agrees on one thing. You can hear the stakes. Every guitar note, every drum hit, every lyric Plant forces through clenched teeth. It all carries the knowledge that this might not work. That's rare. Most albums hide their uncertainty behind production. Presence wears it openly, and maybe that's the real lesson. Not that great art requires suffering, but that sometimes the most honest thing you can do is show the cracks. Led Zeppelin recorded Presence in 18 days and never really recovered. The album hit #1 and disappeared from the conversation. It contains some of their best work and some of their most unforgiving. It's the album they had to make. And the album that proved they couldn't keep making albums like that. In 1976, Robert Plant leaned against a studio wall, unable to stand, and sang about endurance. The album is what endured. Flawed, powerful, impossible to ignore. Whatever else it is, Presence is proof that Led Zeppelin was real. Not mythology, not image. Real musicians in a real moment, making real choices. And sometimes that's the only story worth telling.